next up, we're going to talk about grant application tips for transportation. We have Jessica Hekter from the Omaha Office of HDR, and then Taylor McHenry from the Kansas City Office of HDR. And I'll let you guys take it from here.
Yeah, so Jessica and I will be talking about application tips specifically for transportation federal grant applications. And so again, my name's Taylor McHenry. I've already told you guys, but I am Missouri and Kansas Grant Program Lead. I sit in the Kansas City office. Jessica, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm Jessica Hekter.
Introduce yourself.
I sit in our Omaha office, and I'm the Iowa and Nebraska lead for our grant program there. And I also kind of consult nationally on applications as well as administrative activities.
Thanks. So really to start things off, I want to just go over kind of what Jessica and I consider to be 4 essentials for a winning grant application. It's all about finding the right project that fits into the right grant program. That's may seem kind of obvious, and making sure that we develop a strong application, and we'll kind of go over obviously how to do that today, and then making sure that we have both political and local support for the project itself. So there are things that we can do while we're writing a grant application, before the NOFO period begins, during the NOFO period, and interestingly enough, there's things you can do post-submittal to strengthen your application as well. So the pre-NOFO period, this is really your strategic period of the development of the application itself. So we want to make sure that we evaluate the projects that that you would like to be funded, and then select those based off of some where you're seeing funding gaps, and then also where you think that could be applied for the grant program. And this is a great time to be able to conduct some detailed engineering, environmental, and economic analysis, right? Start your BCA, finish up some of your design work, either start or complete your environmental analysis as well. And it's also a great time to engage political support too. If any of you are familiar with obtaining letters of support, a lot of different politicians and other local organizations, it can take a while for them to, they like to review the application, review your project, and be able to feel confident about supporting the project.
This particular NOFO period too, this pre-NOFO period, is really interesting. If you already have one project or 2 projects, you're really looking at what the theme of those projects are against the merit criteria you're going to have to talk about for different programs to try and do that match. If you are an agency that has hundreds or even thousands of projects, you might take a step back further and think about, of those projects, not necessarily where's your gap in funding, but what aligns best to be supplemented with these federal discretionary programs, and then shift things around. It's kind of a little bit more strategic approach.
It's also time to develop your grant application team as well. Make sure you find who your grant writers are going to be. Find who your technical advisors and support will be as well to help you develop that application. And also, it's the BIL has been in place for a few years now, and so we know which grant programs, we know when NOFOs are going to come out. We know which programs are continuously what you can apply for. So it's good to look back on the previous NOFOs as well, because we're not seeing a ton of changes between NOFOs. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to tell what the merit criteria is going to be, and things like that. So, all right, Jessica, you want to talk about during the NOFO period?
Yeah, absolutely. So during a NOFO period, this is generally a pretty short piece of time. If you're lucky, you get 3 months. Sometimes it's even down to 4 weeks. right? So in these moments, that's where that pre-work really comes in handy. If you've already got your budget in hand, your partner's established some of those things, then you can concentrate your efforts during your NOFO period on what the NOFO says and writing to that criteria. So one thing I always do as a writer is I always do a red line of the previous NOFO to the current, especially if I wrote for it before, especially if I have an existing application. That just kind of gives me an idea of what those nuances are that changed. I always create a brand new application outline using the words in the NOFO, right? You want to repeat those words back. I used to work for Federal Highway Administration. That was a job duty, kind of other as assigned, right? We all ended up screening and evaluating grant applications, pieces and parts of those throughout our careers. And you still are expected to do your day job during that. So your evaluator might be screening. They might be picking it up and putting it back down. So you want to be able to have them be able to search and find the terms they're looking for. You want to think about messaging and branding. So this is especially vital in applications where you might be doing maybe a large project, and you might already have that branded and done from maybe some of your pre-development activities. Especially in Iowa, where I work, we tend to do groups of projects, so we put smaller projects together that are similar into a single application, because that's a better value to have those groups come and do a grant together. So we have to come up with the theme, right? What links those projects together? Why are they the same? What are we getting at from a programmatic standpoint under that application? For the content itself, you have to address the application criteria in the NOFO. And when you write, you should have your scoring rubrics up on one screen while you're creating content for those merit criteria so that they can find what they're looking for when they're scoring. You're going to have to create data-backed statements. Those are going to score better for you than saying something is safe. Well, why is it safe, right? What are you doing in your project that creates it to be safer? I do know that as we create data-backed statements, sometimes we're developing that data. That data actually comes from the BCA or something we're creating on our team. So we want to make sure that the reviewer can validate those data statements. So you're going to want to reference them back to where they're finding it. So if they can't just Google it and find it, you're going to want to show them where you came up with that. We are going to look at engineering, environmental, and economic analysis. We're going to retouch it. We're going to make sure it's valid, right? If there is age on things like cost estimates, that creates doubt for risk and readiness in the mind of a reviewer. And so you're going to want to be able to say that this is well thought out, this is today's standards, this is latest planning assumptions available, this is real, it's deliverable. That just goes towards your readiness and availability and ability to deliver. When you go in for a BCA, a lot of times the scoring rubrics will kind of give you what your scoring averages are. Let's see, how do I say this? Some of our programs have a statutory requirement that benefits have to outweigh costs. That means you need a BCA over a 1, right? To get the highest score, you may need a BCA higher than that, okay? Your competition is going to have a BCA higher than that. So just kind of keep that in mind as you put in for those. When you submit a BCA, it always gets fiddled with, okay? And you'll find out about that after a feedback session. But I've only ever seen them go down. I've never seen them adjusted up. So when you're going in at like a 1.2 and there's a statutory requirement to be over a 1, just have a consciousness that that could put you, if they fiddle with it and it goes down below a 1, that could make you ineligible for the program. So just have an awareness that you want to be in a healthy area for your BCA. In the NOFO, if there are templates that the modal agency who's doing the application, they have developed those and they use words that say like, applicants are strongly encouraged to use our BCA tool or a template or whatever. Just take that as a do it. I always do. That means that's the format they want it in, right? It will be a little bit buggy and hard to use, but it's okay. We can work through that. And then just the last thing I would leave you with is, as you're writing, just to kind of have an understanding of the evaluation sequencing, like what happens to your application after you submit. So it gets split up. That's why you have to usually develop them in all the different parts. Understanding what every step of your evaluation has and what that evaluator is going to look at and have in front of them is important to know if you're going to make it to the pile you want, the pile that goes to senior review team, right? So if they usually talk about this lightly somewhere inside of the NOFO in a couple of paragraphs. And it'll say, first it's going to go through a broad eligibility screening, generally, which is a checkbox type thing. And then usually it goes to merit review, where they're looking through those merit criteria, they're rating you out there, and you have to achieve a certain score to move on at that point. Once you move on, you go to what I would call readiness and risk review, which is where your BCA gets evaluated. It's where they look at your budget deeply. It's where they evaluate you as a technical applicant and your capacity to be able to follow their process and deliver. Because at the end of the day, that is just as important as merit criteria, because investing in your application means that they're taking a risk too, right? What if that doesn't get to a ribbon cutting? So you want to make them have confidence that you know what you're doing and how to get there. And if you need help with that, that's where people who really understand this process can help you out. So post-submittal, so you've submitted at this point, and this is kind of a phase that some people start to think, okay, I'm just going to sit back and wait, right? And you're in that waiting game, and it takes months sometimes, right? Months and months. We try for our clients to advise them to not wait, right? This is a great time to develop materials for congressional delegation visits. It's a great time to hop on political advocacy and really start to talk through those things. Your evaluation is being actively evaluated at this point, so to be able to put bugs in ears, this is a great time to do that. We also try and prep for next grant program at this time, so when we do that strategy in kind of that period one, we actually cycle applications into multiple programs through a grant cycle. So if you are putting in for RAISE, you are likely putting in for one or two other programs too, so we start to think about that. Get ready for that. There will be a moment where US DOT or whoever you've submitted to has questions, okay? It might be that they need more evidence of preliminary engineering being conducted. It could be
questions about BCA.
BCA.
One thing that I want to add is, some grants you submit through, either Valid Eval or grants.gov. Valid Eval actually allows you to add team members to your submittal. If you are a grant lead and you have a consultant team that's helping you, or others that are on your staff, I would highly suggest adding as many of those many team members as you can to your submittal, just so you don't miss questions that come through. Mm-hmm. And that way everyone is kind of aware of those questions coming through. So just something, I just want to note that.
Yeah. If you're going through grants.gov, you have to pick a singular point of contact for your project that's identified in your 424 form. Please make sure that individual is someone who's going to be working for your agency when they actually decide to call, right? That's happened to our clients before, where somebody moved on and then the DOT missed the follow-on, and so they didn't have the opportunity to submit supplemental information, and that's a big deal. So I would just recommend, if you are going through grants.gov, which a lot of these do, and you have that singular point of contact, just make sure that somebody knows that that's on there. You remember that if they do move on, so you can reach back out and change that, just to be aware. Those turnaround times are usually really, really tight. You might have 48 hours up to a week to get them whatever additional information they want. It can be really quick. The other thing we would encourage you to do is debrief with your reviewing agency if you are not successful on your grant, and I would include your team who helped you wrote it in that call. You can have as big of a team there as you want to hear that information and be able to interact with them. The other thing I would just mention quickly is if you do win, first of all, congratulations. Do not incur costs until you are under agreement that you want reimbursed with the grant. That is something that people get really excited when they get awarded. They want to get going right away, but again, that is usually a few months until you are able to actually start, because you have to navigate that contracting agreement phase.
Here's our contact information too, and we have a few IIJA resources on our website if you want to scan that QR code.